Welcome back to Switch to Linux, another outdoor philosophy. We are continuing in the book First Things First, Stephen Covey and Roger and Rebecca Merrill. So we are talking today about the balance of roles, and this is a very fascinating topic to talk about because we all have a lot of different roles in our life and we all feel pulled in different directions in different ways. And so what we need to figure out how to do is how to balance all of the things that we need to accomplish in our life without really letting things slip through the cracks and whatever. And this is where, as you look at different time management things, you have your basic checklists, and then you have, your to-do lists, and start with your basic to-do list or checklist, and then you evolve up into a more robust scheduling, and then you get into this full-out planning. But what this book has been talking about is this fourth method of time management, which is more of a full balance, full encompassing approach to things. And so the balance of roles is the time where we take all of the different things we need to be in our life and figure out how to put them all together in such a way that is that it gives you the maximum productivity in alignment with everything you need to do. So we've already talked about goals, we've already talked about a mission statement, we've already talked about the things we need to do. Now we want to focus in more depth on these roles. And so with roles, we take things such as you might want to be a good father, you might want to be a good husband, a good mother, a good wife if you're a lady listening in. You might want to, you need to be good in your office, good in your job. You might also have other organizations you are a part of, maybe your church organization. You want to be a good parishioner. And so we need to figure out how to take the balance of all of these things and put them together. And it's not as easy as just saying, oh, well, if you're a religious person, oh, God first, and that means he gets the most of your time. Well, most of us spend a whole lot more time in our jobs than we do worshiping God, and that's okay. God put us here for work, so obviously that's okay. But we need to strike some degree of balance in our life, and that is what this chapter, Balancing of Roles, is all about. So, of course, they start out with some fascinating viewpoints. They mention the old Karate Kid movie, not the new remake with Jaden Smith, but the old one. And Mr. Miyagi sends Daniel into the ocean, learn balance, Daniel-san, learn balance. And so he comes in and, Daniel looks over and it's that silhouette Mr. Miyagi on that post doing the crane technique and because he's mastered that level of balance. Well, we need to figure out that level of balance for all the different things we need to accomplish in our life. And it's not always easy. So obviously balance, we talked about these true north principles. Balance is one of those true north principles. We need to figure out how to have balance in order to maintain a good life throughout the various things that we are doing. And so what we do is on the management charts that we looked at earlier, let me see if I can find a copy of it here. If you remember the big time management grids they had pointed out. Where are you? There's one of them. That's not quite the one I was thinking of, but there's one more. There you go. That's the one I was looking for. So we have over here, we have our various roles listed over on this one side here. And then we have, various goals in those areas. And then, of course, over here, it's just giving us our calendar, and then we list things out on things that are specifically timed, and then we also look at things that are specifically just can be done in between things. If the analogy, putting in the rocks and then the sand and then the water, So what we're going to do here is we're going to focus on what are these roles in our life. So we're going to take these various roles, and you want to write down what each of these roles are, and you want to kind of keep them around the groups of 7 because, beyond 7, we have a very, very hard time balancing anything. And so even up to 7, we can have a hard time. So you do not need to have 7, but identify these. I'm going to be a good parishioner or a good worshiper, a good, religious person of whatever your faith might be. You want to be a good family manager, a good father or mother, a good husband or wife. Or maybe you just encompass those into one role, family person. So you have that general approach. And then Your career part will fit in there. What do you want to do in your career? Not only for your current career, but what does the future of your career happen to hold for you? So you have to consider those things as well, and then other outside activities and things like that. And so we want to identify what all of those guys happen to be. And then what we do is we want to fight. We fight as hard as we can the concept of compartmentalization, because compartmentalization is when you start to segregate different parts of your life into different things. And like, okay, there's this whole body around me. The bug chooses right in front of my eyes. It's like, go away, bug. All right, so compartmentalization is when you separate various portions of your life separately, and then you keep those out. You know, those Linux guys, think of cubes, you know. Cubes is an operating system that keeps every one of these guys compartmentalized out. That's great for security on an operating system. It's horrible for your life, because every one of these aspects reaches all of the other aspects of your life, and you need to keep that in mind. And so fight that level of compartmentalization. Instead, you want to focus on synergy, where being one, there's an old business statement. It says, a rising tide raises all ships. What that statement means, a rising tide raises all ships, means that if you have success in one area of your life, it will bleed over into motivation and joy into another area of your life. But if you think about, if you have just had a serious conflict with your teenager, you have a very hard time going to work and just shutting that part out and just working great. If you're not a psychopath, of course. If you're a psychopath, you just, well, whatever. But a normal functioning human being, if you have a relational problem with your family, you have a very hard time working. And so that's one of those balances we need to figure out and we need to strike. And so you want to figure out how to create synergy between your different roles. And so what we identify is 3 different principles. So they have here a picture of a tree, and in the bottom of this guy here, we have your principles down here. So your principles will be that root, that guiding principle of your life. If you are a totally unprincipled person, you have a very shallow and very sad tree. But those that build their life off of foundational principles that they will not break, those levels of integrity that you will not cross, from those spur up our mission. So then our mission shows up here as the trunk of the tree. And with the mission, we have the strength that's being nurtured from the principles that you have, and then it moves up into what the leaves and the branches would be, or the roles. So you start with your principles. Who are you? What does the integrity of your life look like? And then from that you develop the missions that we talked about last time, and then out of your missions you move up into your roles, and then you identify your key roles out of this. So there are 3 basic principles that they give us, or 3 paradigms they call them, to give us balance in these various roles. So the first is our natural roles will grow out of our mission. So we need to examine that mission statement, and a mission statement would be something like, I want to be a good husband and father. I want to be good at my individual job. Those are all be statements, not to-do statements. A to-do statement, it checks off of a list. A be statement is an ongoing progressive thing in life. And so that's what you need to keep in mind, that just because you took the kids out to a movie doesn't mean that it's intrinsically this perfect, good, awesome, okay, check mark, I'm done with that, and I can, never have to do that again. No, you need to keep on building those roles. Okay, but our natural roles will grow out of our mission. So we start with our principles, who we are, and then we identify the mission, things we want to be. So finding out those to be things, and then to be will define the role as to be a good father, to be a good office worker, to be a good parishioner. So you have these balances in your life to figure out, but the natural roles will grow out of our mission. And so we need to keep that in mind. The second is we need to realize that each role is a stewardship. So remember the concept of a steward. A steward is a person who is in charge of somebody else's managers. In fact, they give the definition here. One called to exercise responsibility, one called to exercise responsible care over possessions entrusted to him or her. Okay, so what that means is that somebody else owns these things. You are simply the manager for them. And as Dave Ramsey likes to ask, if you were hired to if you were hired to manage you incorporated, in other words, your life, would you fire yourself? If the answer to that question is yes, then you just need to make some adjustments to your life to figure out how to better live. So remember that each of these is a stewardship, not an ownership. These are somebody else's things. I would call these the things of your higher power. The scripture says in Ephesians 2:10, it says we were prepared for good works. God has prepared us for the good works that He set out before us. You know, God has set out our works, if you believe in that general philosophy, and so we are a steward to make sure that those things are done. And so that is what they're calling here stewardship. And part of stewardship is accountability. There is this requirement of accountability in any type of stewardship. You know, there was, Adam and Eve were created, put in the Garden of Eden, and then they were made stewards of the land. Well, they still had to be accountable to God for how they managed that, and it didn't go well. But what you do here is you identify on your roles chart, you identify over here where the other system lists goals, you might also list your persons. Whom are you accountable to in these? So if you're talking about being a good parishioner, you are accountable to the elders and the pastor and the leadership of that church. If you are talking about being good at your boss, you are accountable, being good at your job, rather, you are accountable to your boss. If you are the boss, you are accountable to, there's usually a higher up. If there's no higher up, then there is a board, and you are accountable to that board for what you do. As far as being a family person, you are cross-accountable, and every person in the family is cross-accountable to every other person in the family. This means that if your kid comes in and says, "Dad, you've been out of balance lately, do something with me," you need to figure out how to get that done. He's calling you into account for the role that you're failing to achieve. So keep that in mind. And chances are your kid probably won't do that, but your husband, your wife, your spouse probably will. So keep that in mind, that each role has a person you are accountable to. So think about the roles you have in your life and whom you are accountable to for those roles in your life. Because even us crazy single people like me, we are still accountable to people for things. All right? Now, number 3 is each role contains all 4 dimensions. So remember the dimensions we talked about before. We have a physical dimension. Okay, we have a spiritual dimension, we have a social dimension, and we have a mental dimension. We need to keep the balance of roles in place to contain all of these. Even though the church seems like this is the spiritual dimension of my life, no, it is the spiritual role of your life, and the spiritual role of your life has a spiritual dimension, might have a bigger spiritual dimension than other roles of your life, but all roles have all of these principles. So the social dimension, of course, is, are you accountable to doing things in that church situation? Are you accountable to the teams and the committees you're working with, or the people that you are teaching? The physical dimension, this is, are you in good enough shape to actually show up to the meetings and not be exhausted, tired when you get there? If you've had a long, hard day at the office and you're practically falling asleep, and you go there and you're there in body, but not in, maybe even in spirit. You're there in body, you're there in spirit, but your mind is gone because you're, too overtired. You are not accountable. You're not being accountable in that particular area of your life. And then, of course, we have the social dimension. Let's see, I think we already talked about the social dimension, the physical dimension, the spiritual dimension, the social, and the mental dimension. Make sure that you're there, present with your brain cells functioning. So those are your paradigms to keep some balance. And so what we need to do is figure out, while we're working on those quadrant 2 goals each week, figure out what those roles happen to be and how we can associate with those individually. So organize your information by roles, but don't fall into the trap of compartmentalizing your life into those individual roles. And then once we have that degree of balance, this is really what's gonna bring everything up. Ever notice how when things are going great in your life, your work starts going great, your family starts going great, everything starts going great. But then if one thing out of there gets thrown out of balance, your whole life goes out of balance. And that's what the principle of the balance of roles is. So thanks for watching this outdoor philosophy. If you would like to help support the channel, what we're doing here, switch to linux.com/support. You can learn about the current ways to support us. As of this video, we have Patreon links down below, we have Amazon links down below, and you can check out the website for anything down the road in the future. So thanks for watching, everybody, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.